I thought I was a master liar. I've been having an affair for 8 months. My husband hasn't just known the whole time. He's been directing it. I need to write this down because I think I'm losing my mind. If I disappear, or if I am arrested, I need there to be some record of the truth somewhere, even if it's just on a server in the depths of Reddit. I know I am a terrible person. You don't need to tell me. I cheated on my husband, David. But whatever judgment you have for me, I promise you, what I am living through right now is worse than any punishment a moral compass could devise. David is a data architect for a private intelligence firm. He is quiet, methodical, and aggressively routine. For the first 4 years of our marriage, I mistook his predictable nature for safety. By year 5, it felt like a straitjacket. We didn't argue, we just existed in a sterile, perfectly temperature-controlled vacuum. Enter Elias. Elias was a freelance photographer who rented studio space in the building where I manage commercial real estate. He was everything David wasn't: chaotic, passionate, constantly broke, and thrilling. When the affair started, I was paranoid. I watched true crime documentaries. I knew how people got caught. I didn't just use a burner phone. I bought it in cash, 3 towns over, and kept it hidden inside a hollowed-out textbook in my office. We never texted on our real numbers. We never went to hotels with paper trails. We met at his studio or at a remote cabin his family owned upstate that had no Wi-Fi and no smart doorbell cameras. I thought I was a ghost. I thought I was the smartest person in the room. The first sign that something was wrong happened 3 weeks ago. The first glitch. I had told David I was going to a weekend real estate conference in Seattle. It was a real conference, and I actually bought a plane ticket, checked in, and then immediately walked out of the airport, rented a car with cash, and drove to Elias's cabin. The weekend was perfect. But on Sunday morning, while Elias was still asleep, I went out to the kitchen to make coffee. Sitting right in the center of the butcher block island was a single, pristine piece of origami. A paper crane. David makes paper cranes. When his hands are idle while watching TV, he folds receipts, napkins, whatever is nearby. My blood ran cold. I stared at the crane, my heart hammering against my ribs. I asked Elias about it when he woke up. He groggily looked at it, shrugged, and said it must have been left by his sister who used the cabin a month ago. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Paper cranes aren't exactly proprietary to my husband. But when I got home on Sunday night, David was waiting in the kitchen. He had made dinner. "How was Seattle?" he asked, not looking up from slicing a roast. "It was good. Exhausting," I lied smoothly. "Did it rain?" "A little," I said. David finally looked at me. His eyes were completely dead. "Strange. The National Weather Service said Seattle had unseasonable, record-breaking heat this weekend. Not a drop of rain." I froze. I scrambled for an excuse. "Oh, it just sprinkled near my hotel. Maybe it wasn't recorded." He just smiled, a thin, horrifying smile, and handed me a plate. "Eat up, Claire. You look like you've had a long drive." Drive. He knew. The disappearance. I panicked. The next morning, as soon as David left for work, I retrieved my burner phone from the office and turned it on to call Elias. Number disconnected. I tried calling him on my real phone, blocking my caller ID. It went straight to voicemail. I left work at noon and drove directly to his studio. The door was locked. I used my master key as the building manager to open it. The studio was completely empty. Not just empty, it was sterile. His cameras, his backdrops, the worn-out velvet couch where we spent hours, his coffee mugs, all gone. It looked like it had been professionally scrubbed. The only thing left in the entire 1,500 square foot room was sitting in the exact center of the floor. Another paper crane. I nearly vomited. I grabbed the crane and unfolded it. It was made from a piece of paper torn from a ledger. On the inside, written in David's meticulous, blocky handwriting, were coordinates. I plugged them into my GPS. They pointed to a location deep in the state forest, about 10 miles from Elias's cabin. The game thickens. I didn't go to the coordinates. I am not an idiot in a horror movie. I went home, packed a bag, and decided I was going to leave. I didn't care about the marriage anymore. I cared about my life. I grabbed my passport, some cash I kept hidden, and walked to the front door. The smart lock wouldn't open. The keypad flashed red. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Where are you going, Claire?" "We have guests coming for dinner tonight." I ran to the back door. Locked. The windows on the first floor of our house are reinforced security glass, something David insisted on when we moved in. I was trapped inside my own home. David arrived at 6 p.m. sharp. He unlocked the door and walked in carrying a bottle of wine and a grocery bag. I was sitting on the stairs, shaking. "What did you do to Elias?" I demanded, my voice cracking. David paused, taking off his coat slowly. "Elias? The photographer? I haven't done anything to him. In fact, I've been very generous to him." "Where is he?" David walked into the kitchen and started unpacking groceries. "Elias had a lot of debt, Claire. Gambling mostly. Some unpaid taxes. He was looking for a way out. I simply offered him one. A very lucrative severance package, if you will, on the condition that he disappear completely. He took the money without hesitating. He didn't even ask to say goodbye to you." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, but the terror quickly overtook it. "You paid him off? Why?" David poured 2 glasses of wine. He walked over and handed me one. "Because I needed him out of the way for the next phase, and I needed you to understand exactly how little you meant to him. Drink your wine, Claire. Our guest is arriving soon." "Who is coming?" I whispered. The doorbell rang. David smiled. "The police." The setup. David opened the door. 2 detectives were standing on our porch. "Mr. Vance, we're sorry to intrude," the older detective said. "We're looking for your wife, Claire." David played the perfect concerned husband. "She's right here. Is everything all right?" They came into the foyer. "Mrs. Vance, we are investigating a report of a missing person. An Elias Thorne. His landlord reported his studio was cleared out overnight. We found some concerning financial anomalies linked to his accounts, and your name came up in his recent communications." I stared at them, the blood roaring in my ears. I looked at David. He looked back at me with an expression of mild, supportive confusion. "My wife?" David asked. "She just manages his building. I don't think they know each other well." "Actually, sir," the detective said, looking at a notepad, "we have records indicating Mrs. Vance transferred $45,000 into Mr. Thorne's account 3 days ago." "What?" I gasped. "No, I didn't." "The transfer came from your personal offshore account, Mrs. Vance," the detective continued coldly. "Offshore account?" I didn't have an offshore account, but David did. And David had all my biometric data, my passwords, my social security number. As a data architect, forging a digital trail was child's play for him. "We also found a burner phone registered to a P.O. box in your name, Mrs. Vance, containing some very aggressive text messages threatening Mr. Thorne if he ever tried to expose your relationship." David had taken my burner phone. He hadn't just found it. He had cloned it. He had spent the last 8 months not just watching my affair, but meticulously fabricating a parallel digital narrative. While Elias and I thought we were being secretive, David was busy framing me for extortion and, potentially, murder. "I think we need you to come down to the station, Mrs. Vance," the second detective said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. The trap. David stepped forward, putting a protective arm around my shaking shoulders. "Detectives, please," David said smoothly. "My wife has been struggling with some severe mental health episodes recently. Paranoia, delusions. She's currently under psychiatric care. Is it possible Elias Thorne took advantage of her condition to extort money from her and then fled? The detectives paused, looking at David, then at me. I was sweating, hyperventilating, staring wild-eyed at my husband. I looked exactly like a paranoid, unstable woman. We have medical records documenting her recent psychotic breaks. David lied seamlessly. I knew, with absolute certainty, that if they checked my medical files, David would have hacked them to show a history of severe mental illness. David looked at me, his eyes burning into mine. It was a silent ultimatum. Go with them and face a fabricated mountain of evidence that will put you in prison for a financial crime and a disappearance, or agree with my story and become my prisoner here. Claire, honey, David said, his grip on my shoulder tightening until it bruised. Tell the detectives. You haven't been in your right mind, have you? You were confused. If I told the truth, that I was having an affair and my husband framed me, it sounded absurd. A crazy woman's defense. The digital evidence was perfect. Elias was gone. I was entirely at David's mercy. I looked at the handcuffs. Then I looked at my husband. My voice shook. I have been unwell. I don't remember transferring the money. He threatened to hurt my marriage. The detectives exchanged a look. We're still going to need you to come in for formal questioning, Mrs. Vance, but your husband can accompany you. The new normal. That was 2 weeks ago. The police investigation into Elias is stalled. Because of the narrative David spun, the police view Elias as a con artist who extorted a mentally ill woman and fled the country. They aren't looking for a body, because David convinced them there isn't one. And honestly, I don't know if there is. I don't know if David really paid him off, or if Elias is buried in the state forest. I am too terrified to check those coordinates. I am legally a free woman, but I am not free. David secured a court order for medical conservatorship over me, citing the police investigation, the missing money, and my confession to the detectives as proof that I am a danger to myself and incapable of managing my own affairs. He controls my bank accounts. He took my phone. I have a new phone that he monitors completely. I am typing this on a public library computer during the 1 hour a week he allows me to leave the house to volunteer at a local charity. Though I know he tracks the car's GPS. We still sleep in the same bed. We still eat dinner together. Every night he asks me how my day was. He smiles. He kisses my forehead. And every night, before we turn out the lights, he leaves a single paper crane on my nightstand. He didn't just catch me cheating. He orchestrated the perfect revenge. He destroyed my lover, legally bound me to him forever, and holds the threat of prison over my head every second of every day. My 30 minutes are almost up at this computer. He will be checking the car's location soon. If you are having an affair, and you think you are smarter than your spouse, you aren't, because you have no idea what they are truly capable of when they stop loving you and start hunting you. Title: Final Update. The paper cranes have stopped. I played his game and I found the one thing a data architect can't delete. It has been 7 months since my last post from that library computer. 7 months of living in a psychological terrarium, monitored, controlled, and systematically broken down by the man I married. If you are reading this, it means the dead man's switch I set up on my email has finally triggered, posting this draft to Reddit. It also means David is in federal custody, and I am somewhere he will never, ever find me. Here is how I destroyed the man who thought he was God. The art of playing dead. For the first 3 months after the conservatorship was granted, I fought. I tried to smuggle notes to the bank tellers. I tried to whisper to the grocery store clerks. But David was always there, intercepting my panic with a sad, apologetic smile, whispering to them about my condition. He had built a perfect digital fortress. Every time I rebelled, my restrictions tightened. So, I realized I had to do the one thing David didn't expect. I had to submit. I became the perfect, hollowed-out wife. I cooked his meals, I stopped asking questions. I took the medications he doled out every morning, which I learned to palm and flush down the toilet. When he left a paper crane on my nightstand, I didn't cry anymore. I just placed it in a glass bowl in the living room. David is a man who thrives on control, but control requires a struggling subject. When the struggle stopped, he got bored. And when a mastermind gets bored, they get sloppy. His first mistake was expanding my privileges. He allowed me 2 hours at the library on Tuesdays, up from 1. His second mistake was assuming that because he controlled the digital world, the analog world didn't matter. The skim I started preparing in the kitchen. David controlled the finances via a joint credit card that tracked every penny. But he still gave me a $50 cash allowance every week for the farmer's market, because he liked fresh heirloom tomatoes and the vendors didn't take cards. Every week, I bought the cheapest, bruised tomatoes I could find at a discount stand, and I pocketed the remaining $45. I hid the cash inside the hollow curtain rod in our guest bathroom. Over 4 months, I accumulated nearly $800 in untraceable physical paper. Next, I needed a distraction. David tracked my car's GPS and my phone's location. During my library visits, I noticed a teenager who always hung around the alley, smoking, skipping school. On a rainy Tuesday in October, I approached him in the blind spot behind the dumpsters. I handed him my monitored phone, my car keys, and a $100 bill. "Drive this car around the city for exactly 2 hours," I told him. "Don't speed. Don't stop anywhere weird. Bring it back here at 3 p.m., leave the keys under the mat, and I'll give you another 100. He looked at me like I was crazy, but he took the money. I watched my car pull out of the lot. For the first time in almost a year, I was off the grid. The coordinates. I walked 3 blocks to a main avenue, flagged down a city cab, and handed the driver $200 in cash. I gave him the coordinates David had written inside that very first paper crane, the ones pointing to the state forest. The drive took 45 minutes. My heart hammered against my ribs the entire time. I didn't know what I was going to find. A grave? Elias's belongings? A trap? The cab dropped me off at the edge of a gravel fire road. I told him to wait and promised him another $200 for the return trip. I walked into the tree line, using a cheap magnetic compass I had bought with my tomato money. I navigated the dense pine trees and thorny underbrush until I reached the exact coordinates. A small, natural clearing marked by a massive, lightning-struck oak tree. The ground wasn't disturbed. There was no grave. I fell to my knees, frantically digging through the damp leaves and dirt with my bare hands. Nothing. I started to hyperventilate. Had he just given me fake numbers to torture me? Then, I looked up. Nailed to the trunk of the oak tree, about 10 feet up, was a weathered wooden birdhouse. It looked ancient, but the nails holding it were shiny and new. I scrambled up the rough bark, tearing my jeans and scraping my hands until I could reach it. The roof of the birdhouse was on a metal hinge. I flipped it open. Inside was a heavy, black, waterproof pelican case. I pulled it down, fell back into the dirt, and snapped the latches open. The trophy room. David was a data architect. He knew better than anyone that digital information could be hacked, altered, or wiped. He knew cloud servers could be subpoenaed. But David was also a narcissist. He needed a trophy of his brilliance, a physical record of his perfect crime that couldn't be corrupted by an EMP or a rogue hacker. Inside the case was a Polaroid camera, a stack of photos, a microcassette recorder, and a thick, leather-bound ledger. I opened the ledger. It was David's handwritten diary of the entire operation. It detailed exactly how he cloned my phone, the code he wrote to bypass the offshore bank's security protocols, and the exact timestamps of his fabrications. But it was the photos that made my blood run cold. They were Polaroids, impossible to digitally alter. They showed Elias in his studio, tied to a chair. The next photo showed David holding a gun to Elias's head while Elias typed on a laptop, transferring the money that framed me. The final photo showed Elias getting into the back of a black van, alive, but surrounded by 3 men I didn't recognize. David hadn't killed him. He had sold him out to the loan sharks Elias owed money to, using the $45,000 he stole from my accounts to pay the down payment on the bounty. And then I played the micro cassette. It was a recording of David and the detectives on the night I was framed, but it continued playing after they left. It captured David walking back into the house, laughing softly and saying into the microphone, "Checkmate, Claire. The database is updated, and reality is what I say it is." It was a complete, analog confession. The burn down. I didn't take the box to the local police. David had them in his pocket, convinced by his narrative. I took the cab straight to the downtown Federal Building. I walked into the FBI field office, covered in dirt, bleeding from my hands, and slammed the Pelican case onto the duty officer's desk. "My name is Claire Vance," I said, my voice shaking but louder than it had been in a year. "My husband committed wire fraud, identity theft, kidnapping, and extortion. I have the physical evidence, and I need protective custody right now. Federal agents don't care about a local medical conservatorship. They care about interstate wire fraud and offshore accounts. When they opened the ledger and saw the IP addresses and the Polaroids, the temperature in the room completely changed. They put me in a safe house. They raided our home at 2 a.m. According to the agent assigned to my case, David didn't resist. He was sitting in his pristine kitchen, folding a paper crane, waiting for me to come home. When they slapped the cuffs on him and read him his rights, his only question was, "How did she bypass the firewall?" He still doesn't understand that you can't put a firewall on a forest. The aftermath. David is currently in a federal holding facility awaiting trial. The digital evidence he fabricated was meticulously dismantled using his own handwritten ledger as the cipher. The local police dropped all potential charges against me, and the conservatorship was instantly voided by a federal judge. As for Elias, the FBI raided the warehouse of the men who took him. They found him alive, but badly beaten. He is in witness protection now. I haven't spoken to him. The illusion of our grand romance died the night he disappeared without trying to warn me. And honestly, we are both better off pretending the other is dead. I legally changed my name last week. I packed my remaining clothes, took the rest of my tomato cash, and moved 3 time zones away. I live in a small town now. I work at a local bookstore. I don't use smartphones, I don't have social media, and my front door has a heavy, analog brass deadbolt. I know I am not a good person. I know my infidelity started this entire nightmare. I threw a rock into a quiet pond, completely unaware that a monster was sleeping at the bottom. But I survived him. The nightmare is finally over, and I will never look at a piece of origami the same way again.